Okay, guys, hopefully we're live, and I know, I'm sorry, we are in Florida, so the setup isn't going to be nearly as good as the one we have in Texas. Just something we're going to have to deal with. I heard that there was a slight echo with our audio last time. I did what I could to try to fix it, but I don't know how that is going to really get fixed outside of us just finally getting back to Texas, finally being back to our full setup, but we are going to do what we can do, and that is live stream. That's me answering your questions, talking about free agency. So I'm sure that we are going to have a decent amount of people coming in right now. Everybody that subscribed to the channel has that notification bell hit next to it. I just want to give you all a massive, massive thank you for coming out and hanging out with me during this live stream. And what we're going to be doing is we are going to be talking about some of these free agent wide receivers landing spots. Specifically, I want to go over some predictions on the rest of free agency. I want to talk about how some small signings have potentially led to us understanding where some other players may end up going, because spots are drying up across the NFL. I mean, you don't necessarily have a guarantee of a certain player like Juju SmithSchuster landing in the New York Giants organization at this point, just because there have been some other smaller signings. Of course, we are going to get into that. Let me pull up the general chat right now, because we can go through and we can talk about exactly what y'all are wanting. So just talk it in the chat. Let me know what y'all are wanting to hear about. Let me know what players y'all want me to cover. Right now, we have Brotherhood, Butthead, Evan, Alejandro, all out here. Thank y'all all so much for coming out. Okay, so first, Evan asking, where do you have Terry McLaurin now? I've seen people having him in the top 12. Okay, so obviously this is in reference to two things. A, Ryan Fitzpatrick coming in, and probably, at least for fantasy purposes, being by far and away the best quarterback that Terry McLaurin has. We know that coming out of Ohio State in that 2019 wide receiver class, that Terry McLaurin actually profiled to be a little bit more of a field stretching wide receiver, someone that was going to give space to other options underneath, as he has that elite speed, but because he has been playing alongside some subpar quarterbacks that really can't push the ball down the field aggressively, we have not been able to see him be that elite deep threat that he can be. Obviously, Ryan Fitzpatrick coming in is a fantastic option, and the Curtis Samuel signing is a little bit interesting here. Obviously, it's a reunion, but what we have to look at is Antonio Gibson is very similar to Curtis Samuel in that they are both that hybrid type player. They are both that player that you didn't necessarily know if they were going to be a pure wide receiver, pure running back, or something in between. Coming out of college, Antonio Gibson coming out of Memphis, Curtis Samuel also coming out of Ohio State. So there are a few things that we are going to be looking at with this Washington offense. I will say Curtis Samuel coming in doesn't really impact a player like Terry McLaurin that much. Maybe if it was Corey Davis, then we would be a little bit more concerned, because in the case of Corey Davis, we know that he profiles to be that typical X wide receiver that is going to be seeing a significant amount of targets, that is going to try to dominate on the outside. But in the case of Curtis Samuel, no, he is going to be that wide receiver that can be very efficient on very few targets. So I actually like Curtis Samuel coming in for Terry McLaurin, because this is a team that was going to bring in a wide receiver no matter what. So you definitely want the guy that's coming in and not going to see a ton of volume. You want the quarterback coming in as well that's going to push the average depth of target a lot higher for Terry McLaurin. So yeah, I think that now he's that borderline top 10, top 12 wide receiver going into year 3. I mean, he has been superb in his first 2 years. He has a great complementary speed wide receiver playing alongside him, getting the best quarterback for fantasy purposes. I mean, that Jameis Winston, that DGAF quarterback effect, where they don't necessarily make the best decision every time. They don't necessarily limit turnovers, but what they do is they aggressively push the ball down the field, get the wide receiver a ton of air yards, which translates over to fantasy production. So yeah, Terry McLaurin, even with the Washington football team investing significantly into Curtis Samuel, I mean, he is a big-time winner this free agency. Very similar to what we said with Carlos Hyde going into Jacksonville, and how that actually helps James Robinson and protects from a running back that we would actually be scared of. Same thing here with Curtis Samuel. Love the player, love the fit, and I just think that this is great overall for the Washington football offense. Okay, so let's go through and let me try to find our next question with our next player that y'all want us to cover. Okay, so let's go. Butthead asking, do you think a big name running back will go to the Eagles and lower Miles Sanders' value? No, not worried about that, but let's focus in on the wide receivers this video. Okay, Vinny coming out says, asking a trade question. No, guys, we are going to be focusing in on wide receiver free agents. Okay, Zedbout asking, saying the Keenan Cole Keelan Cole signing is intriguing to me. Yes, that is intriguing to me. I believe they gave him $5 million. Keep in mind, this is all at the top of my head, so I could be a little bit wrong with these numbers. But what that tells me is the most likely landing spot for Juju Smith-Schuster, the most likely landing spot for Kenny Golladay, is now most likely gone now that they've invested, I want to say it was like $37 million over 3 years for Corey Davis and the $5 million 1-year deal with Keelan Cole. Now, obviously, that $5 million is a lot more than a lot of people were expecting, but you're going to have to convince a player to go to the New York Jets. We understand that also signing in New York instead of Florida, instead of Texas, is definitely going to change the amount of income you're seeing with all the state taxes that they have. But regardless, we can say with Keelan Cole that he's going to be a very similar type player to what we said with Carlos Hyde going to Jacksonville, where no, you're not worried about him taking a ton of targets away from Corey Davis, but he is acting as that just wide receiver shield to make sure that this team doesn't bring in a Kenny Golladay, to make sure this team doesn't bring in a Juju Smith-Schuster. So I actually really like the fact that Keelan Cole just signed with that team to kind of protect our Juju shares, because y'all know I have a ton of Juju Smith-Schuster. I overdrafted him. I overpaid for him last year in Dynasty, and now I am kind of sitting here biting my nails going, okay, the Miami Dolphins, that landing spot may be gone with Will Fuller signing that 1-year deal. So where is he going to be going now? We have the reports saying the Jets were intrigued, but that was before they brought in another wide receiver for $5 million. So unless we see drastic changes with the other players in that team, which can easily happen. You look at the Jamison Crowder contract and can easily see Jamison Crowder possibly being a cut candidate for this team by the time we get to them signing Juju Smith-Schuster. So that's the one thing that you could be a little bit wary of here. But at the end of the day, the Keelan Cole signing is not going to mean a lot for Keelan Cole's fantasy value, not going to be someone that is worth much more than just a waiver wire pickup in Dynasty, but going to be a player that we understand is going to be making it where it's less likely that those other players sign there. And while we're in New York, let's just stick it with Corey Davis. Let's talk about Corey Davis right now, a player that I actually really liked in that 2017 draft class coming out of Western Michigan. And with Davis, I mean, he profiles to be that prototypical X wide receiver. And this is why we always talk about going and trying to buy the wide receiver, trying to buy the running back that got the first-round draft capital. This is why I'm telling y'all, maybe if you can get Josh Jacobs for an early second right now from some owner that is straight up panicking, it could be a decent idea, even if his short-term value is a little bit limited with Kenyon Drake being the pass-catching running back. Because time and time and time again, we see these NFL franchises be willing to significantly invest into the players that had the pedigree coming into the NFL draft, had the first round draft capital, even if they were slightly disappointing on their rookie contracts. They are going to get way more chances than the wide receiver, just say like a Robert Foster, who popped off as an undrafted free agent for the Buffalo Bills his rookie season, yet he popped off, and then his sophomore year he was disappointing, and then you're out of the league. If you do not have that pedigree coming in, it's kind of hard to see you sticking around that long. That's why you love to see Corey Davis getting that massive deal. And he's landing on a team that is probably going to cut Jamison Crowder, just brought in Keelan Cole to make it less likely that they get Kenny Golladay, less likely that they get Juju Smith-Schuster, and they're probably going to be taking Zach Wilson second overall in this year's NFL draft. So Corey Davis, I love the signing. I would buy now before we see anything happen to Jamison Crowder, and people kind of get smart. People go, okay, hey, maybe we see Corey Davis with over a 25% team target share, because that's what the contract signifies, and we know that he had a fantastic profile coming into the NFL. Okay, so let's go through. Evan coming in says, what should we make of Andy Dalton now being the starting quarterback for Allen Robinson in terms of his fantasy value next season? Okay, a few things here. Let's talk about Allen Robinson. I believe he just signed that franchise tag today. Okay, so with Allen Robinson, we understand that, yes, I mean, he is possibly one of the most talented wide receivers in the entire NFL, but he's also been cursed throughout his entire NFL career coming out of that 2014 draft class out of Penn State. I mean, he has dealt with some of the worst quarterback play. I mean, he has had Blake Bortles, Nick Foles, Mitchell Trubisky. I think we can safely say, while Andy Dalton is not a stud by any means, that Andy Dalton could easily be the best quarterback that Allen Robinson has ever had. And to go along with this, we know that one of the reasons you love Allen Robinson in fantasy is because he has consistently shown that he can have a 25 to 30% team target share, no problem. And this is a team talking about possibly trading away Anthony Miller. And while I kind of went out and said that we liked the Curtis Samuel signing for Terry McLaurin, because Curtis Samuel was that speed wide receiver that doesn't necessarily need to command a ton of targets to be productive, what his value is he's going to increase the efficiency from other players in the offense. Anthony Miller, kind of the exact opposite of that. Anthony Miller is that slot wide receiver that instead is going to be going through and really only providing the value from the targets that he gets. He's the player that benefits from other people stretching the field for him. So if Anthony Miller is moved out of Chicago, and then you have Darnell Mooney stretching the field for Allen Robinson and the best quarterback of his career ever coming in, even if that is only Andy Dalton, I mean, what other options is A-Rob going to have? I'll say that we should be expecting him to maintain his status as a low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2, based off of volume and talent alone, not anything about the quarterback play. Okay, so let's come out and look for our next question. And quick shout out, I just want to give everybody a massive thank you for dropping a like on the live stream. I mean, consistently, time and time again, the people on the flock just kill that like to view ratio. I think we get more likes per viewer than pretty much any other fantasy football channel I see on YouTube. So I just want to give y'all a massive thank you for doing so. And anyway, let's go through Vinny asking us what are our thoughts on Juju Smith-Schuster's current situation. Now, I will say what is intriguing about Juju is the fact that not that he hasn't signed, but the fact that we've seen some of these other wide receivers in free agency like a Will Fuller that you would expect to see a significant amount of value in terms of the money that he's getting in that contract. They really didn't live up to that. We've seen a lot of wide receivers outside of the Nelson Aguilar getting way overpaid get surprisingly low contracts. I was expecting Juju to be somewhere in the same range of a Corey Davis, another wide receiver from that 2017 draft class. But now I think that the contract he should be expecting is probably a little bit smaller. And I know that's sad to say. Y'all know that I love Juju. And we look up at the landing spots and they are kind of drying out. But because we are expecting the contract with Juju Smith-Schuster to be lower than we initially thought, that kind of opens up a few more options here where he isn't just being pegged as someone that's going to go to Miami, someone that's going to go to New York, someone that's going to go back to Pittsburgh. Now, if the contract that he should be expecting with his agent is a little bit lower, I think that gives him more flexibility to go and, you know, he's going to fit nicer in a team's overall cap situation. So I'll say I'm excited that we think it's a little bit less likely that he ends up finding himself on the New York Jets because they just signed Keelan Cole to that $5 million contract. And obviously they paid Corey Davis the bag. But at the same time we go, I mean, it's hard to just find an easy fit now. I mean, the Miami situation, you could still make work given the fact that Will Fuller is only on that 1-year deal. And Will Fuller is someone that is not going to command a ton of volume. He's more so the Curtis Samuel mold, where he's that speedy wide receiver that's going to significantly improve the overall efficiency of the offense rather than commanding a ton of volume himself. And if the team hasn't invested a ton of long-term money, I think it would make sense for them to bring in Juju Smith-Schuster through free agency. But the problem is with that, then they go, okay, we have so many first and second round picks. If we sign both Will Fuller and Juju and we have Devontae Parker on the roster, then that probably limits us from drafting a wide receiver in the first 2 rounds. And with such a great class this year, I think they are in no need. They are in no rush to go out there and limit themselves like that. So Juju, it's interesting. Short answer is, I don't know. I don't know what to expect. I would say Green Bay would be intriguing, but the thing with Green Bay, and I hate to say this about my man, but he's TikTok boy. He needs to grow his social media following. That's pretty much all he is about, Juju Smith-Schuster. I don't want to say all he is about, but that's going to weigh into his decision. That's why I think New York was such an intriguing spot for him. So Green Bay, I don't think that's a big enough market for him. I think with Juju, it's going to be hard to see him go anywhere. I haven't read any reports about the Los Angeles Chargers, even though I would love that landing spot, even though Keenan Allen and Juju would have to share the slot responsibilities, but Hunter Henry is out of there. So maybe there are some more possible routes to be run over the middle of the field, and they just have to change their personnel a little bit. But it's going to be a little bit frustrating to try to paint that clear picture of where Juju is going to land. Okay, so Ja Webb coming out says best landing spot left for Kenny Golladay. Here, this is another thing that we need to talk about. The most recent report is Golladay is having some interest from Baltimore. And I was talking on Patreon earlier this week saying that's the one thing that you need. That's the one thing that you need Kenny Golladay to avoid. You do not need Kenny G going to Baltimore where he is not going to get a ton of volume. We know the passing offense isn't going to be there. We know that they like to funnel through the tight end a little bit more. Marquise Brown, I will say, is a perfect wide receiver to play alongside of, just like we were talking about with Curtis Samuel, just like we were talking about with Will Fuller, that he is going to increase the overall efficiency of the other wide receivers that he's playing with without taking away a ton of volume. But the overall volume of the offense would be a little bit too low. So with Kenny G, it's so hard to say. It's so hard to view exactly where he could land and boost his fantasy value because he profiles to be that prototypical X wide receiver. I would love to see him back in Detroit. I think that is by far and away the best landing spot for him now, even though the quarterback play would be some of the worst in the league. With Jared Goff, we know that there is so much volume to be had there. I mean, right now, they really only have TJ Hawkinson, and outside of that, I don't necessarily see that many players that are going to be soaking up targets. Okay, so I see Brandon saying Kenny Golladay to the Bears. They want him to team up with Robinson. I can't really see that. They profile to be pretty much the same type of wide receiver. I think that it would be very intriguing to see Kenny Golladay alongside Allen Robinson. If the overall offensive structure was a little bit different in Chicago, maybe they had one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. Maybe they were able to go out there and they were able to aggressively push the pass, kind of like Kansas City, kind of like having some of the highest rates of passing on early downs in the entire NFL. But that's not what Chicago wants to do. Chicago wants to play. They want to. I don't think they can. They want to play elite defense and they want to kind of control the game. That's why they brought in Andy Dalton. So I don't necessarily see them spending that much money on Kenny Golladay. Okay, Uzi coming out says Golladay to the Raiders. That is the spot that we want to see. Thank you, Uzi. Thank you so much for coming out here and shutting me up. No, Juju or Golladay, if they go to the Raiders, that's the best spot possible. Even though it's a poor offense, even though it's a poor quarterback, we understand that what is king at the wide receiver position a lot of times is just straight up volume, especially if you're talking about a slot wide receiver in Juju Smith-Schuster, especially if you're talking about a prototypical alpha in Kenny Golladay. So yeah, I would love to see the Raiders. Okay. So Noah said Sleeper just reported the Bears might offer him a one-year contract for $11 to $12 million for Kenny Golladay. That is surprising. I don't necessarily expect Kenny Golladay to accept that contract. I would assume, keep in mind, I am not working in an NFL front office. I don't know nearly enough to say this for sure. I would assume that Kenny G would demand a much nicer contract than that, but maybe with the injury scares, that's what's going to bump him down. Okay, so let's go through and Mike mad at us saying Carr is a poor quarterback. Man, please try to name 10 starting quarterbacks in the NFL that Derek Carr is currently better than with the rookies coming in. I think that Derek Carr is probably a bottom 10 starting quarterback in the NFL. Okay, let's go through and let's see if we have any other questions. Butthead asking us thoughts on Denzel Mims now. Here with Denzel Mims, a little bit intriguing. Mims, to myself, has always profiled to be a field-stretching wide receiver. I know that some people wanted to paint him in the picture coming out of Baylor as that prototypical X, someone that can see 25% of his team's targets. I didn't see that with Denzel Mims. I saw someone that was going to play on the boundary, someone that was possibly going to create space for the other players around him. So I'll say with Mims, he's someone that's going to come down to entirely what Zach Wilson can bring to this team. I don't mind the fact that Corey Davis is coming in, to be honest. I don't mind the fact that Keelan Cole's coming in, to be honest. I think with Denzel Mims, it's all going to come down to how much offensive production can Zach Wilson provide. Okay, so let me go through and see if we have any other questions. Okay, Rudra coming out says Tua's outlook with Will Fuller. I actually love what the Miami Dolphins are doing. I love bringing in Will Fuller. I believe it was around $10 to $11 million on a one-year deal. I am excited to see what Tua can do. I think that this is a team that is definitely going to bring in another wide receiver, to have Devontae Parker at the X, to have Will Fuller stretching the field, and possibly just say they bring in someone like Rondale Moore in the second round. I think that would be extremely intriguing to have him play in the slot. So right now, if you could buy Tua and you're not necessarily going to have to pay a ton for him, I think that would be something to do, because when they continue to add weapons, people are going to start to get excited about Tua. I mean, think they have multiple second-round picks. What if they go Travis Etienne with one, and then they decide to go with Rondale Moore with the other? Okay, so now let me see if we have any other questions. Okay, Vinny saying rip a beer like a real Texas grad. Uzi wanted us to take a shot. Guys, can't be doing that right now. Maybe when we get back to Texas, we can do something fun like that. Okay, so let's see if we have any other questions about wide receiver free agency. I will say we are going to be live again tomorrow. So if you were unable to make it out to the live stream, or if I was unable to get to your question during this live stream, make sure that you just subscribe to the channel, drop a like, but most importantly, you need to hit that bell next to the subscribe button. That way you can come out. That way you can come out during these live streams and ask me your question. I think we are going to be avoiding running back and just overall dynasty trade questions in this video because I want to keep it with the wide receiver free agents. But maybe in tomorrow's video, I can go through and I could just answer trade questions. I can go through, maybe break down a few of your teams. Unless we get more wide receiver or running back free agent news, then we can cover that. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got for y'all. I think we covered pretty much every free agent signing that we needed to talk about. But if we missed anything, I will guarantee you that I will cover in the live stream tomorrow. So please just make sure you're coming out then. And yeah, if you want me to answer any of your dynasty questions at any time, make sure you're supporting the show on Patreon where I can do that. And I have a very, very, very exciting Patreon announcement that we should be making whenever I get back to Texas. But thank you guys. That's it. Drop a like, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. I will see y'all.